Thanks for joining us on the John Mendola Show. We're driven by McCarthy Tire Service. Fortunate enough to be joined by Mark Stauffer, the Misericordia University women's soccer coach. Mark, your season not affected, but nonetheless, when you have a program like yours, everything's affected, every sport. Really an unfortunate circumstance, but everybody's going through the pandemic, and obviously, some people didn't even get to have their season this past spring. Talk a little bit about your thoughts right now on what life is like here as we get into May.
Yeah, this is just, it's a time for all of us to learn a little bit, the whole just life in general, the recruiting process, the university search process, and high school kids looking for schools is just going to be drastically different moving forward. So we're just sort of using this time to look at some other ways that we can be doing things, and and some of these things we may carry forward in the future. We've done a lot more just online Skype interviews, Google Meets interviews, Zoom interviews to meet with families and meet with recruits and get our word out to club coaches. So it's just a different way of thinking. Life throws us different things, and I think we all just need to roll with it and figure out a different avenue.
Let's talk about soccer and women's soccer in particular, as far as, some young ladies in high school thinking about, hey, I'd like to play college soccer. When is too early to start thinking about it? And I'm sure, parents have some thoughts. Let's talk a little bit about from a young student athlete's perspective.
Sure. I would say by sophomore year, you should definitely already be having emails out to coaches that you might be interested in playing. It's always better to start early and get along the process and find out what you like and what you don't like, and then you have the information that that is necessary to move forward in your search process. I think the only thing you can do wrong in your college search process is really wait too long. A lot of student athletes wait until late junior year, early senior year to start looking. And for some programs, that's just going to be too late already at that point. So you kind of have to put yourself out there in the timeline of the fastest university's recruiting scale, and then you'll fall into everyone else's. If you slow yourself down and you don't start till that senior year, it's going to work for some schools, but you're going to miss the boat on a big handful of universities as well.
About as far as student athletes thinking, okay, do I want to go Division I, Division II, Division III? There's a lot of options. We've had conversations in the past said, listen, if you're really interested in playing college soccer, there's probably a program out there for you. You got to go find it, as you just kind of alluded to.
Yeah. Division I, Division II, and Division III, they're basically numbers to just break up the divisions. They're certainly not a divider of quality of soccer necessarily. They're certainly not a divider of quality of academics necessarily. The college search process really needs to come down to each student finding the fit that is right for them. You're going to be able to find, Division III soccer programs that can beat the majority of Division I programs that are out there. You're going to be able to find top-notch academic institutions that are Division I, and you're going to be able to find top-notch academic institutions that are III. So it really comes down to just, like we talked about, starting early, getting that process rolling, and then find the school that fits you from both the academic side of things and the athletic side of things that can make it work. I think too many kids fall in love with the idea of a division, and they find out that life on campus is a little different if that's all you focus on.
Club soccer. So, a student athlete may play some high school soccer, but ultimately college coaches are probably going to be looking at, okay, are you involved in club soccer and at what level? And, that may be an opportunity for a college coach to check out what your game is about.
Yeah, the club game has really changed over the years. It's really geared now towards the recruitment process. The majority of kids that will want to play in college play club soccer, but there are those that occasionally don't. We had a player a few years ago that never played a day of club soccer in her life, and just a rural high school, and wanted to study physical therapy, and we started recruiting her from her high school team, and she became an All-American for us. So it can be done outside of the club world. But to get exposure and get yourself out there, it's pretty important. It's dropped a little bit from the standpoint of now we're with universities being able to host ID clinics on their own campus. Now it gives you another avenue to get recruited through, even if you don't play for an extremely high-level club team. So I think the addition of the ID clinics to the NCAA world has been a huge attribute to the students looking for the right fit.
Parents, their role. Let's talk a little bit about, you may get the overzealous parents like, hey, my kid's a Division I kid. You may get the parents who are not real sure, what should happen in that process. What's some good advice overall for all different types of parents that, say, okay, this is what my kid wants. This is what my role should be in the involvement with the student athlete.
Yeah, I think the parent role needs to be obviously a part of it. At the end of the day, they're probably the one paying for it. And they're trying to help and direct their 15, 16, 17-year-old son or daughter into making the best educated decision for their future. So the way I always tell it when I'm recruiting a kid actively is when the parents have questions, I'm here for them. I'll answer anything I can. I think a parent role to listen to what their son or daughter is telling them when they visit schools, and just being able to provide some basic parental advice to their son or daughter is important. But at the end of the day, we want to, as coaches, we want to personally recruit the student themselves, because that's the person we're going to be spending our time with. So I think the parents that do it the best way just do it in an extremely supportive role to their daughter, and then just ask the necessary questions that they need the information for to make sure they can make it work financially and make sure that their daughter's making a good decision for her future, not just academically or soccer-wise, but socially as well.
When you talk about how things are changing and where we are with this pandemic currently, let's talk a little bit about, those ID clinics that probably aren't going to happen for many universities at this time of year, where you would get them in April or May. Some have some over the summer. Those are still pretty unclear across the board at all levels of women's soccer.
Yeah, I think this is going to cause a bit of a gap. Basically, like with us, for instance, with our 2021 class, we have 4 kids committed to that class, but they were kids that we started the process with when they were freshmen. They've been to multiple ID clinics already. We already got them, academically where they need to be to get accepted to their majors. So they were a little easier because we started early. But those kids that we would have truly spent time getting to know and evaluating at our spring ID clinic, and even our summer ID clinics are still up in the air. It's just going to kind of push the timeline back. We're going to go well into the fall, finishing up our 2021 class this year, just because it may come all the way down to an October ID clinic this year, getting those last couple kids on campus, which goes all the way back to our original question that we talked about, is that this is just a crazy reason why you need to start early, because obviously this is something that we hope isn't going to happen every year, but things like this pop up all the time and slow the rate of the recruiting process. So yeah, I think during this dead time, it's really important for young women to just start emailing coaches directly, just with some interest, and just say, hey, I'm interested in looking at your school. I kind of want to study this major. When are you going to be able to have your next ID clinic? When you do, I'd like to come to it. So I would tell recruits during this time, be patient. Don't make early decisions. I know, some coaches are probably pushing kids to make premature decisions, trying to just get the class done. But I think during a time like this, everybody needs time to really think through this and make sure they're making the right decision for them and their families. So just be patient with the process and understand that, especially with this 2021 class, it's just going to be a slowed process, truly.
When you talk about recruiting a student athlete, you think about how many hours you put in to student athletes. So, we'll think of a class. So say you're looking out a couple of years from now to put together a class. You'll probably meet how many? More than 100 student athletes, and then only take in a handful of those student athletes, and probably similar to most colleges or universities at that point.
Yeah, it'll change at the level of your program. With us now, we'll typically, like with our 2022 class, we'll start with a pool of around probably 350 kids in that class. Now there were far more than that originally, but we get it to about that. And then going into this fall, we'll really start dwindling that number down to probably about 50 2022 kids that we're going to get serious about over the summer, starting this summer. And then it dwindles quick. Some by their choices, because they get other offers at other schools and they take them, and some from our side where something comes up, either whether academically or athletically or just team-wise within our own program. If you have an All-American center midfielder that decides to, stay and play her fifth year because she redshirted a year, well, that changes your recruiting for that class 2 out. So, sometimes it's things within the program that you don't really have control over either that changes how you're going to recruit those future classes. Again, it's going to start big, but then it'll get small pretty quick, starting in your real early junior year.
The competition that you face year in and year out, I know you schedule a lot of non-conference teams that are pretty darn good, but in conference it got a little better this past year or so. So the competition is heating up there in Division III and Misericordia University. I'm sure you kind of like the challenge, but at the same time that, hey, a lot of these schools are after these same young ladies.
Yeah, it's become real interesting in our conference. We legitimately should have 3 teams ranked in the top 20 in the country in our conference. So it's good for competition. It's good for our conference. And that's why we just stay true to who we are at Misericordia. I'm not trying to convince a kid that fits better at another school to come play for us. I'm going to find the health science kids that are top quality players and that are top young women that just fit us, and they believe in our values and our what we believe in as a team. If we recruit to the right person and it's an easy recruit into our program, then it's an easy 4 years with that student athlete. So it's a lot more work for us, but we really pride ourselves on just finding our niche and recruiting to our niche and wanting a kid to be part of our program as much as she wants to be part of ours. And when it works out like that, it's a pretty easy marriage.
That structure and consistency that student athletes, obviously adults like us, we all need it. Right now, that's lacking for many of them in the sense of you have an off-season program. I'm sure you're on board with communicating with them in some capacity, like most college coaches are. But even dwindling down now to some of those high school student athletes that didn't have a spring season that may have been pretty active, that can have an effect as the time goes on here. So any advice you could give to some of the student athletes in general for, right now, hey, you're a soccer player, but maybe you played some softball or you did track and field in the spring and you don't have that right now. Probably a good idea to get some regular practice or some regular workout routines going.
Yeah, it's the first thing I said to our players when we found out we had to leave campus back in March. I said there are going to be this is a time of separation in one direction or another, and the programs that have committed student athletes that are going to put in the extra time are going to really rise to the top, and the ones that were in that top 30 to top 60 in the country, if those student athletes don't buy in, that gap's just going to get really big in there. And, that's something we've pushed and we've challenged our players. We tell them all the time, when you don't feel like doing something, neither does 95% of the world. So be the different 5% and go out there and do it. So make the difference, gain the advantage. And the same is true with the high school kids. Those kids that lost seasons this spring in another sport, or they're not getting to train with their club teams right now. the elite players are out there trying to separate themselves during this time. They're not going to lose these 3 months like some other student athletes are that aren't going to push themselves. And it's just like life. The people that jump at these opportunities and are mentally strong enough and tough enough to push themselves through when nobody's there pushing them, they're going to get results for themselves, and they're going to end up in some pretty cool situations in the years to come.
Well, Mark Stauffer, we appreciate your time during this pandemic to give us some good advice for some student athletes, some parents at all levels of what they want to do with the game of soccer and so on. We wish you and your family the very best in health, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it and hope all is well.